This is a horrifying case that once again shakes trust in those we expect to protect our children. Teachers. Sandy Carazas-Pinez, a biology teacher, groomed and sexually exploited a 16-year-old student with special needs through texts, video calls, secret off-campus meetings. But now, the justice system has finally caught up with her, and this predator is going away for a very long time. We're going to break down the shocking details and what it means for the victim, the school, the law, and we're going to break it all down with a former criminal prosecutor. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. You know, it is really, really hard to imagine how disturbing this case is, because you have a New York teacher, entrusted with the care, the education of vulnerable students, who is accused of using her position to sexually exploit a 16-year-old student at a special needs school. We're talking about Sandy Carazas-Pinez, and her actions, prosecutors say, were calculated, manipulative, deeply predatory, and I'm going to give you fair warning right now to brace yourself for what's to come. This 36-year-old teacher, she is accused of taking advantage of a teen with mental health challenges, convinced him they were in a romantic relationship, arranged sexual encounters, and even coerced him into live-streamed sexual acts, all while maintaining her facade as a trusted educator. This is the story put forward by prosecutors. Oh, and by the way, I should mention that Carazas-Pinez is a married mother with 3 children of her own, okay? Now, after years of manipulation and abuse, this former teacher is finally facing the consequences. And this case goes back to January of 2022, when Sandy Carazas-Pinez was a biology teacher at the Biondi School. It's a Yonkers school for students with special needs. It's run by the nonprofit Rising Ground. So between January of 2022 and March of 2023, she had a student in her class, a 16-year-old boy who became the target of her grooming and abuse. And according to the federal indictment, yes, brought up on federal charges, around November of 2022, Carazas-Pinez began singling out the student for personal attention. She exchanged frequent text messages with him, and that escalated into sexual content and conduct. And let me tell you, that is very consistent with what we talk about here on Sidebar. And one of those texts that was reviewed by the New York Post read, "I know for me it isn't going to be easy. I will miss your kisses, hugs, and everything." That text, by the way, was reportedly in reference to a discussion the two had over whether they should end their relationship. Now, the government alleged that Carazas-Pinez also used her personal phone to call, text, video chat, arrange sexual encounters, and even persuade this teen to engage in live-stream sexually explicit conduct. Prosecutors noted that she referred to these encounters as gifts, framing sexual abuse as some sort of twisted token. But the abuse wasn't confined to digital interactions. No, according to prosecutors, while at school, Carazas-Pinez, she touched the student inappropriately and convinced him to touch her over her clothing. She escalated further by instructing the student to obtain day passes to actually leave campus so she can meet him off school grounds. She is accused of driving him to multiple locations, including the Bronx, Yonkers, Staten Island, where sexual encounters occurred. And even when the student apparently tried to end this relationship, the indictment says that she coerced him to continue by threatening to remove school privileges. She concealed the abuse from the school until February of 2023, when officials apparently noticed her off campus with the teen, observed close contact in the classroom. She was terminated from her position at the school, but I will tell you, the termination didn't stop her. The indictment details how Carazas-Pinez continued communicating with the student, including sending texts from a new phone number, instructing him to delete prior messages. She was arrested a few months after she was fired in July of 2023. But I will tell you, her legal troubles, they didn't end when she was arrested. We're going to get into that. But first, to help me break all this down, I want to bring on a special guest. I want to bring on Dan Schorr, former criminal prosecutor. He also leads a sexual misconduct investigation firm that works with schools and educational institutions. And he's an author. He's an author. And a book, by the way. Dan has a book that is just, every time we bring him on, it's unfortunately very similar and consistent with what we're talking about. Real quick, Dan, tell everybody about your book.
Sure. So my latest novel is called Open Bar. It came out last month, and it's about high-profile sexual misconduct allegations at a school based on my investigations. And it's similar to these type of conduct that you're talking about. I try to show the real-world aspects of it in a fictionalized setting.
Can I just say what you told me before we came on? You said, are there any teachers left? Because every time we have you on, it's like another educator is accused of this horrific behavior. While this is consistent with what we talk about, does this one feel different? How does it compare to other cases maybe that you've handled?
Right. Well, I think the fact that it's a special needs student from a special needs school shows even more vulnerability on the part of the victim and more of a power play by the teacher. And I think a lot of these cases involve people in a position of power, in a position of trust, to abuse that position of power and trust and take advantage of someone. And here it's even more egregious because it is someone from a special needs school and it's ongoing. It's not a one-time incident. So there's a lot of factors here that make it even more aggravating to learn about.
If I tell you about inappropriate touching, or if I tell you about sexually explicit messages, that's clear cut. However, when you look at the beginning of this relationship or certain aspects of this, as laid out in the indictment, is it tough to know when that ethical or legal boundary is crossed between a teacher and a student, or is it relatively simple? Is it relatively clear? I mean, what are those ethical or legal boundaries? Is it any time, they exchange text messages, that's a problem? It steps beyond what's appropriate? What are you looking out for when we talk about red flags?
Well, that's a great question. I look into those issues as an investigator now, and I did as a sex crimes prosecutor. There are certain conduct, such as touching another person's intimate areas, genitals, breasts, buttocks, or kissing, that's clearly crosses the line, that is illegal, immoral, and also unethical for a teacher to do. Then there's problems because there's a lot of gray areas. And often sex abuse like this does not start with explicit sexualized interactions. Usually there is some boundary probing and crossing lines of personal touch, touching someone on a shoulder or somewhere else that may not be explicitly sexual, but is crossing the line between a teacher and a student. And many schools now, I'd say most schools now, have rules that teachers are not supposed to ever communicate with their students about anything that's not related to school and should not be texting on non-school platforms after school hours, especially. So that does cross a line.
Now, I'll tell you, this is a very demanding life, and I'm constantly running around. I'm busy. I need fuel to keep my energy up throughout the day. But I'll tell you, a lot of supplements and bars meant for on-the-go snacking, they can be a mess. They have misleading labels. They have really complicated ingredients. Well, I'll tell you what, that's why I love what our sponsor Equip is doing, because with clean nutrition in mind, they're all about real food first, transparent sourcing, third-party testing. There's no toxins or fillers sneaking in. Their Prime Bar, it isn't just another protein bar. It's a grass-fed beef superfood bar that tastes just like dessert, but there's no junky syrups or seed oils. Equip is built with real functional ingredients like 20 grams of pasture-raised protein, dates, and honey for that natural sweetness. You can have a box on hand for whenever you need that sweet fix. So you can go to equipfoods.com/sidebar. You guys are going to love how clean and delicious these bars are. They're going to be a household staple for you and your family. Now, Equip is giving my audience an incredible offer right now. You can hit the link right here or go directly to equipfoods.com/sidebar. Use my promo code sidebar to get 20% off of your first order or 35% off of your first subscription. So thank you to Equip for making the best bar on the market and partnering with us. Are you surprised by the digital evidence in a case like this?
More and more these cases are built on digital evidence, and you would think, why would someone who is doing something like this have so much explicit content and really confessions about what was going on in online messages? And I think it shows how emboldened this teacher felt, that it was not something that she was necessarily hiding at that point. I see that in so many cases now. This is just how people communicate in this day and age. And so many of these cases, people don't really have a defense saying they didn't do it because the online messages show it all.
Can you just elaborate a little bit further about what responsibilities schools have under federal law and regulations to detect and prevent abuse? Because how often do schools miss opportunities to intervene? Are there weaknesses in the system? Is hindsight just 20/20 and there was really nothing that could be discovered beforehand? I mean, you tell me.
Sure. Well, first, you should do a thorough background check before anyone's hired. But for most of these cases, the teachers, like this teacher and other teachers, they often don't have a civil or criminal background problem, and there's nothing that would be detected. So, what has to be done? There needs to be a culture in a school where if people see warning signs, boundary blurring behavior, like we were talking before, that people can report it, that people know how to report it, that people are not afraid of retaliation. Because a lot of people at schools and other organizations may see someone touching another person or interacting in a way that they think might be inappropriate. They're not sure, but they're afraid to get someone in trouble. They're afraid that they'll be blamed. They don't want to cause a ruckus. They just want to go about their jobs. And I think you need a culture where you say, look, if you see anyone doing something with a student, especially that might be inappropriate, here's who you can report it to. And if it's made in good faith, the report, there's not going to be any consequences for the person reporting it. But in a lot of places, there's a culture where no one reports things. It gets worse and more egregious. And that's where schools get in trouble when they knew or should have known that something like this was happening, but they either turned a blind eye or they took minor remedial ways to address it that really didn't stop the behavior.
So I mentioned legal troubles earlier. This is interesting. When she was arrested, she posted bail. And to be very clear, she was released under strict conditions that completely forbade her unsupervised contact with minors. But apparently, she violated those conditions multiple times, emailing another former student shortly after he turned 18, and that prompted federal authorities to revoke her bail and place her in custody. So Dan, first of all, can you explain how bail conditions are set in cases involving sexual offenses against minors? What factors lead to no contact with minors? And my gosh, a violation of that?
Right. It is shocking when someone is caught doing something or charged with doing something like this, and then they continue to violate the clear instructions. You would think just out of their own self-preservation, they would follow the rules of the court. But it's standard when someone's charged with a serious sex crime, as this teacher was, that part of the conditions, if they are released, is that they can't have any contact with the victim or anyone else who's underage. There's often monitoring of that. Sometimes people have to give up their access to online portals, so they can't have a phone or computer. And I don't think that was the case here, but I've seen that in other cases where they say you just can't be online with anyone at any time because the person is perceived to be dangerous. But here, the teacher apparently still connected with people after that. And it really shows a brazenness that is shocking, because you would think that just to avoid their own liability, criminal liability, civil liability, they would say, okay, I need to stop what I'm doing. So this is clearly something that this teacher felt a compulsion to do and did not stop.
And now I want to dig into the federal indictment, okay? So it paints a picture of premeditated and compulsive behavior. And it reads in part, quote, Sandy Carazas-Pinez, the defendant, knowingly using a facility and means of interstate and foreign commerce, persuaded, induced, enticed, and coerced an individual who had not attained the age of 18 years to engage in sexual activity. And the federal indictment lays out 2 counts: enticement of a minor and production of child pornography. And as for enticement of a minor, the document states, from in or about November 2022 through in or about February 2023, Sandy Carazas-Pinez abused her position as a teacher at School 1 by inducing and attempting to induce minor victim 1 to engage in a sexual relationship with her. And further down, it states that she, quote, used her personal cell phone to call, text, and video call minor victim 1's cell phone to maintain her relationship, arrange sexual encounters, and repeatedly induce minor victim 1 to engage in live stream sexual explicit conduct while on video calls with Carazas-Pinez. In text messages with minor victim 1, Carazas-Pinez referred to her sexual encounters with minor victim 1 and the live depictions of sexually explicit conduct she induced minor victim 1 to create as GIFs. On the charge involving child sexual abuse material, it reads, from at least in or about December 2022 through at least in or about February 2023, Sandy Carazas-Pinez employed, used, persuaded, induced, enticed, and coerced a minor to engage in sexually explicit conduct for the purpose of producing a visual depiction of such conduct and for the purpose of transmitting a live visual depiction of such conduct. And the defendant knew and had reason to know that such visual depiction would be transported and transmitted using any means and facility of interstate and foreign commerce, to wit, that she induced minor victim 1 to engage in sexually explicit activity during live stream video calls with Carazas-Pinez while minor victim 1 was in Yonkers, New York. So, Dan, first of all, Why is this so significant that she was brought up on federal charges? Because that's not always the case. Sometimes in these cases, they're usually just state charges. But why is this a federal charge? And why is it significant that you have a federal case here?
Right. Well, that is very serious for this defendant, this teacher, because the federal charges can stem from being communication. That's the text, video chatting, and where they were doing that from. So that's something that falls under federal jurisdiction. Federal law often has severe sentences that may be even more than state sentences. Also, when someone is prosecuted in a state court and in a federal court, sometimes there's consecutive prison time, which means they serve one sentence and then the other. And usually federal prosecutors do not bring cases like this unless they feel there is extremely solid evidence to back them up. Otherwise, they leave it to the states to prosecute. That's my experience as a sex crimes prosecutor. So they must be very confident in a conviction on their end if they brought charges like this that are very serious.
So it's the using a facility or means of interstate or foreign commerce. It's the idea that that's a big component to that as well in digital communication, live streams.
Right, exactly. And here, as you said, that she allegedly got him to live stream sexually explicit content on video calls. And again, this is a special needs student who's underage. So you have the underage factor. You have the fact that she's in a position of power and influence over him as a public school teacher, and he's a 16-year-old student. And also that this is ongoing. This isn't a one-time thing. This was a relationship where she was trying to get him to engage in more explicit sexualized conduct, both in person and live streaming. So this is a really serious set of facts, and that's why it fell under both federal and state jurisdiction.
Yeah, and by the way, let's just talk about this. When she was finally sentenced for her disgusting and disturbing crimes, and we will get there, it's very significant. I do want to talk real quick about why she would even think she could get away with doing something like this. Because the last time we covered this case, we spoke with Dr. John Delatorre, and mental health professional, who told us that he believed that she saw her student as a vulnerable pawn, exploiting mental health or behavioral challenges to coerce him. And her status as a married mother of three, he said, may have even emboldened her, giving her the illusion that no one would suspect such behavior. Dan, there's a part of that I think could be real, in the sense, as I say these stories, it's kind of hard for me to grasp with the reality of what's going on. Do you agree with that? In your experience, do you agree with something like that?
I do, and I did see that interview. I thought it was a really interesting interview and insight from the expert that was spoken to. I think that a lot of people who do this type of behavior that teachers allege to have done, they feel emboldened to get away with what they're doing. I don't think people generally engage in this conduct thinking that they're going to be caught. Why would they feel emboldened? Well, first of all, they're a teacher, they're an authority. The person who they're doing it with is underage and in a special needs school, so they may feel that person is more isolated and has less recourse to report it. And often those are the people who are preyed upon. Someone who the teacher thinks is not going to be believed, is not going to report this if they, leave the relationship at some point. So also, often, as I said before, usually this type of conduct does not start with just some explicit sexualized interaction. Usually this boundary probing, this blurring of lines, and then it leads one thing to another and escalates. And the person feels emboldened over that time. It's like, oh, I got away with this. Maybe I could get away with this. Maybe I could get away with this. Yeah. And it escalates and escalates from there.
So the legal system caught up to her. September 19th, U.S. District Judge John P. Cronin sentenced Sandy Carazas-Pinez to 25 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton emphasized this betrayal of trust, saying sexual exploitation by teachers offends every New Yorker. Sandy Carazas-Pinez betrayed her role and through explicit texts and other means coerced a 16-year-old into a sexual relationship. Actions of this type by anyone, particularly a teacher or other person of trust, will not be tolerated. Now, Dan, it's our understanding she pled guilty and was ultimately sentenced to 25 years. Is this the appropriate conclusion? I mean, 25 years, pretty significant here, makes a statement on the federal level. What's your take?
Right. So I believe she was facing even more time, potentially life in prison. So 25 years is less than that. But you're talking about a core part of one's life. She's 36 years old, so she would be 61 when she would be released if she serves that full sentence. And, that is the prime ages of someone's life. So to give that up is an extremely significant sentence. I do think it is the correct sentence considering the harm that was done to this child, the ongoing nature of it, the fact that it was an underage student. She was in a position of trust. It was a special needs school where she was working. So it's an appropriate sentence, and it's a very significant sentence.
And avoiding trial, pleading guilty, avoiding trial, obviously, like you said, there could have been an advantage to the defendant because of what she could have been facing, but you don't have to put a jury through this. I always say you don't have to put a jury through it in this kind of case and even have, a victim testify or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times, both the prosecution and sometimes even the defense feel they don't want to put the victim through it. And also for this teacher, if they feel the teacher and their defense and her defense team or defense lawyer feel that they're not going to get an acquittal, that there's so much evidence, that there's all this online evidence and other evidence, they're going to be convicted, then why go through a trial for the defendant themselves? It just seems like they might escape that, get a slightly lower sentence if that's the best case scenario for them.
Dan Schorr, good seeing you. Thanks for taking the time as always.
Thanks, Jesse. It's good talking with you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.